a former alcoholic turned world champion, Poatan Alex Pereira has perhaps the most incredible story in combat sports history. This young man, an Aboriginal of Brazil, was born into poverty in Sao Paulo. He then dropped out of school from a young age so that he could be a bricklayer's assistant. This was to provide for his family's future. As a child, he was only 11, 12 years old, and he already had to take care of his family. At the age of 13, he then began working in a tire shop. In lieu of money, he apparently was paid in alcohol. These issues, these conditions, of course, led to major problems with him being an alcoholic. Until he was an adult, he had alcohol issues. But he was saved through combat sports. Initially, he wanted to go into boxing, but his coach said there's quite a challenging road to get into professional boxing, but you can get into kickboxing quite easily. So he said, no problem. I've never heard of kickboxing. I've never seen it in my life, but kickboxing seems just absolutely swell. And that was his ticket out of alcoholism. Martial arts saved this man's life. And because he got into martial arts a little bit later, it influenced his style to just take a few very key skills and maximize those to the highest level. Rather than having a whole highway full of skills, this man has a one-way avenue of some very, very sharp skills. And we're going to get into those just a little bit later. In Glory Kickboxing, he became a 2-division champion, holding titles at both middleweight and light heavyweight. His main rivals include people like Donegi Abina and Artem Vakatov. Donegi Abina is the champion today in Glory Kickboxing. Artem Vakatov is now chasing Alex Pereira down by joining the UFC, just as Alex Pereira chased down Israel Adesanya from kickboxing to the UFC. Since making his UFC debut, the heavy-handed knockout striker Hands of Stone Poatan has been a gift to the UFC. This man is an exciting striker whose face, whose demeanor, whose aura strikes fear in opponents, in fans. He has grown to be a fan favorite. And whenever the UFC needs a quick main event fill-in, Alex Poatan Pereira is always there to help out the UFC. He has been one of the greatest things to ever happen in the UFC's history. This weekend, he'll take on Khalil Rountree Jr. live from Salt Lake City, Utah at UFC 307. Let's talk about the matchup a little bit more here. Khalil Rountree Jr. is coming off of a very short suspension due to a testing positive for some PEDs, but he's coming off of some major knockout wins. He's got 5 wins in a row in the division, most recently coming off of a knockout win against Chris Dakaus and Anthony Lionheart Smith, the former top contender. I think this matchup might be a little bit closer than what people are giving it credit for, and it should be a very interesting and it'll be a sharp matchup in which 2 guys who have knockout power in all of their strikes will be facing off. And for that, it's going to be quite exciting. In terms of the punch-to-punch, kick-to-kick, I actually think it's going to be a very low-paced fight. But Khalil Rountree Jr. has a couple of things that he can use very well against Alex Pereira to perhaps win. Him and his coaching staff know what kind of fight they're going to get themselves into here, and they're going to be well prepared. But Khalil Rountree Jr., when he is at his very, very best, he is a very creative and inventive Muay Thai striker. Bangkok-ready Khalil, as we've often talked about. What I particularly like about the southpaw striker is his bouncing lead leg, as you would often see in Muay Thai. And this is to counter any kicks that may be coming, and also you're constantly getting ready to counter with teeps or lead kick round attacks. Now, in MMA, it doesn't come up too much because you don't want to be doing a lot of that and committing your hips to kicks because you're worried about the takedowns. You don't want to be on your lead leg bouncing, again, because you want to be able to counter takedowns. But against a heavy kicker or a Muay Thai fighter, you want to be light on your lead leg so that leg attacks have less of an effect. Now, against Alex Pereira, that plays very well into Khalil Rountree's game. Alex Pereira is going to be looking for calf kicks, heavy lead leg attacks, and Khalil Rountree Jr. will be very ready to counter those attacks and then return with something. I also like his Bangkok ready style because he's always circling out and looking to land leg attacks. And very few of Alex Pereira's opponents have been able to mix leg attacks into punching combinations, which if you watched him in kickboxing, he's an incredible, incredible fighter, but you do need to overwhelm him with volume. If you come at him with a 1-2, a 1-2-3, a double jab cross or something like that, he knows exactly how to counter it. But if you're mixing a low kick into a double jab cross and the low kick on the exit, gives him a lot more problems, especially if you throw a clinch in the middle of all that. It does give him problems. Someone like Alex Pereira, sorry, not Alex Pereira, someone like Artem Vakitov was able to give Alex Pereira tons of issues by just staying extremely aggressive and always attacking with something, whether it be attacking with punch or kick or clinch. Just always keep him guessing so he never knows what's going to happen next. So he's always light on the lead leg. He's ready to counter the calf kicks. He's going to utilize the teep. He has beautiful, beautiful leg attacks, solid leg kicks to the thigh. He did eat some leg kicks against Anthony Smith. We'll see. But eventually he was able to counter off of these leg kicks against Anthony Smith. He's got a very good body kick, especially to the open side. One thing I don't like about his game, though, is that his lead hook is kind of a mess. It's just so wide. He's southpaw, so it becoming, just so wide. It just comes like way around and it kind of lands like almost on the thumb, like Fedor used to do back in the day. Like, just needs to tighten it up a little bit, keep it a little bit tighter. He's like almost throwing it over his opponent's head sometimes because it comes so wide. And I think against Alex Pereira, that's probably the shot that's going to end the fight. As in Khalil Rountree throws wide and gets knocked out because of that lead hook. But I know, if I'm wrong, that's fine. But if I'm right, come back to me on that one, okay? Because it's going to be a southpaw versus orthodox stance, Khalil Rountree is very active on the lead hand attacks, always looking to control the lead hand. But he's almost comical in that he uses a hammer fist to bat the lead hand away. And it is quite funny to see because no one else does that, but he just straight up punches it. I think the last guy I saw do that was like John Jones would do it sometimes. No, sorry. Rampage Jackson was doing it to John Jones because he would splay his hands out trying to hold distance. And I think Rampage just punched his hand. And that's essentially what Khalil Rountree does, especially against people have lead hand control. So he just, hits people out. And it's really cool to see. He is a patient Muay Thai stylist who looks to knock people out, whether it be with his knees in the clinch, whether it be with his heavy kicks to the body, heavy kicks to the legs, whatever it might be, or punches to the head. This man is looking to knock people out. That is his whole game, and he loves knocking people out. Alex Poatan Pereira. Again, he started a little bit late in the game. So he just got 1 or 2 skills, and then he sharpened his entire game around those very, very impressive skills. These calf kick and his lead hook. Now, other very good strikers like your, Lyoto Machida, someone like that, or a Shogun Hua, has tons and tons of skills, a quiver full of various attacks, punches, knees, elbows, kicks, whatever it might be. They have everything. They have 100,000 skills that they're incredible with. But Alex Poatan Pereira is good in almost all these skills, but amazing at the 2 skills that he's really focused on. It's like he's trying to funnel all of his opponents onto the same thing, and that's, of course, his lead left hook, which has worked repeatedly for him in the UFC. He's got an incredible leg kick, calf kick, body jab, great lead hand control in southpaw matchups. He's got a great body kick as well, but it all leads somewhere. Now, in his last fight, when he defended the title against Yuri Prochazka, we, of course, saw his lead head kick attack, and my goodness, what a highlight that was. It is amazing to see him fight, but what I like most about him is that he is a systematic striker. He is a systematic knockout striker. He knows what he's trying to do. He recognizes what his opponents are trying to do, and he's not wild. He's not desperate. He's not urgent. He waits for his opportunities, or he builds the opportunities himself, but he is a very patient striker with an incredible, incredible system. Ultimate prediction in this fight. At the end of the day, this is a very good fight for Alex Pereira, I think, to show off a little bit. I think Khalil Rountree will have a few moments here and there, especially in the first round. I think he's mixing leg attacks with punching combinations, but I think ultimately I've seen his punching game. I like his punching game a lot, but I mean, the right crosses, the left crosses are great. That's really good. His kicks are really good. I think he's going to do well in this fight, better than most people are giving him credit for, but ultimately, this is going to be a knockout win for Poatan Alex Pereira, who will retain the title in this matchup and take the crown as the UFC's top star at this point. Like, this man doesn't speak any English, but you just show a photo of him and people recognize what's going on here. This guy's cool. This guy's badass. He's a stone cold, stunning. He is a Poatan 316, stone cold, stunning. Also on the card, you have Raquel Pennington. Oh, and then what's next for him? I don't even know. He has cleaned out the entire division. Like, he has beaten all the former champions, and the last champion before that was Glover Teixeira, who's of course his coach. I guess Jan Blachowicz is kind of there, but Magomed Ankalaev is definitely there as well. But then, like, the next top guy that he hasn't beat, it's like Ion Gutalava. There really does need some fresh blood, but Magomed Ankalaev has a style that would counter Alex Pereira quite well. And of course, Magomed Ankalaev might just get knocked out, and that's fine, but the UFC doesn't really want that. But let's take a look at the rest of UFC 307 here. We have Raquel Pennington looking to defend her title against the former champion Julianna Peña. 135-pound women's title. Pennington's a bit of an all-around fighter. She's good in the clinch. She's good at grappling. She's pretty good at striking. Not incredible at any area. She very much has a underwater effect when she fights. She looks like she's a little bit in slow motion. For a champion, she's not inspiring in any way. Julianna Peña is an exciting fighter. She's always moving forward. She's always aggressive. She certainly does not have any system going for her. She just throws stuff and sees what lands and sees what works. And she doesn't, throws a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then shoots for a takedown, or she just throws a 1, 2 and 8s 5 punches or something like that. It will go to a decision in this fight, but it's a matter of, I expect it to be quite exciting. Raquel Pennington, Julianna Peña, whatever it is, whoever wins is just keeping that belt warm for Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison is the most talented person in this division, who has a major flaw, who has a major problem in her game. It is that she may not be able to cut this weight very frequently. When I interviewed her a few years ago, when she was fighting at 155 pounds, she was saying, like, I can barely make 145. And now she is going to try to routinely cut to 135. There's no way. Here's the timeline that I expect. She cuts to 135 here. She cuts to 135 one more time to take the title. And then she gives up on the 135. Probably goes up to 145 and then works from there. 145 is a much more natural cut for her. But she has a size advantage on everyone in this division, an experience advantage. She is simply skill-wise better than everyone else in this 135-pound women's division. She's going to be fighting Ketlen Viera at UFC 307. Ketlen Viera, of course, has some very good skills to her name. She is a black belt in both judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She has spent a lifetime in grappling in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and judo. She has good control time. She has a very long average fight time. She holds one of the longest records in the women's bantamweight history for long fight time and control time, which is to say that she's not overly a finisher. She has that Sean Shirk-esque skill of just laying and praying, or, someone along those lines. That Matt Hughes sometimes, just a lay and pray kind of fighter. She takes people down and then hangs out on top. Against Kayla Harrison, if she is going to do that, she is going to get submitted. I have no doubt about that. She's going to come in for a takedown. She's going to enter into the clinch. She's going to initiate a clinch, initiate a takedown. Kayla Harrison will submit her. I have no doubt about that. It's just a matter of when. Kayla Harrison, of course, I'm very confident in that she wins this fight. I love Kayla Harrison's story as well, in that she was one of the first Americans to medal in judo in the Olympics. She was a training partner of Ronda Rousey, which, by the way, Ronda was in the Olympics at like 150 pounds and then cut to 135 for MMA. Kayla Harrison was 170 pounds and then is trying to cut to 135 in MMA. Like, it's a massive, massive difference here between those two. She was sexually assaulted systematically by her team of coaches, and now she has an organization which tries to bring awareness on how athletes can avoid this. Women in sports are routinely, systematically sexually assaulted, and Kayla Harrison was a victim of this, and now she talks about it in her organization with her book. Love the story. Multi-time PFL champion. She was the face of the PFL before transitioning to the UFC. Of course, the Amanda Nunes fight has to happen. Amanda Nunes is out there, retired. the greatest of all time, but I think she's leaving a little bit of money on the table here against her former training partner, Kayla Harrison. And I think if Kayla gets the 145-pound title, I think Amanda Nunes is going to come back. She's shown some stuff on Twitter that makes me think that she wants this. She wants to come back. Anyway, so we got 4 fighters on this card here. Raquel Pennington, Julianna Peña, Kayla Harrison, and Ketlen Viera that ultimately are going into a small 4-person tournament. And at the early 2025, I do expect Kayla Harrison to come out on top of all of that. Also on the card, you have the highly exciting Mario Bautista against the legend, Jose Aldo. Now, I remember when Jose Aldo was first signed to the WEC. He was in no way an underdog. He was an underdog in life, but when he was signed to the UFC, based on the way that he had won his way through Vale Tudo and Muay Thai and MMA tournaments, it was very clear that this man was going to cut through anyone in front of him. And then during his WEC run, God, he was so young and so hungry and so brash. He had an incredible Muay Thai system. This guy's throwing double flying knees. He's knocking people out on leg attacks. He's knocking people out with anything you throw at him. Knees. He was absolutely incredible. He was absolutely electric. And that's why he's your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. Fighters watched him and went, how do I learn how to strike like Jose Aldo Jr.? He is just incredible. Now, he has cut his teeth through a lifetime in the UFC. Recently retired, had a boxing match, kind of looked terrible. Now he's back in the UFC. Very traditional MMA fighter right there, but he's everyone's favorite fighter. He is a fighter who has faced the best of the best, from Uriah Faber to Petr Yan, just division. He's fought Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski and Chad Mendes, like even people who went on to incredible success, and we didn't entirely know who they were at the time. But yeah, he is just absolutely incredible. I mean, we were just talking about, we'll talk about him in a few minutes, but Renato Moicano, of course, had a recent loss to Jose Aldo, and such is life. But I do love this fight. Mario Bautista is a very forward, exciting fighter. He is a slick striker at the 135-pound division. He is young and hungry. He is the up-and-comer against the grizzled veteran, and he has some really impressive striking skills for this bantamweight division. Combinations, knees. He's very smooth punching. If you want to learn how to punch, Mario Bautista might be your guy. From his 1-2, from his double jab cross, he's just absolutely awesome. I do see that he is a lot more aggressive than he is defensive. So he doesn't have a great defensive system, but he makes up for it by being relentlessly aggressive. The forward nonstop pressure is how he really makes his game. And against Jose Aldo Jr., I think that's actually quite good. That is a Max Holloway-esque game plan, but I do recognize that Mario Bautista is not Max Holloway, of course. But it is the right area to exploit someone like Jose Aldo. Mario Bautista also really mixes in strong leg attacks into his punching combinations and then circles out really well. But then when he's attacking, it's usually on straight lines. It's a person who has, if you looked at the video game stats for Mario Bautista, offense 100, defense 0. So this is like this is a collision kind of fight, because Jose Aldo is a mixed fighter for the last few years, but he's mostly a counter puncher. But he does get buried with a lot of pressure. But if he just finds those couple of things that works, like a body punch, a body jab, a leg kick, his opponents stop moving. No doubt about it, it's a bantamweight fight with an old grizzled veteran against the young up-and-comer. That is fight of the night right there. I have no doubt about it. If you tune into anything on UFC 307, it's got to be Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo Jr. That is a banger of a fight here. If you're looking for safe bets, Kayla Harrison is a safe bet right there. Alex Pereira is a very, very safe bet. If you're looking for live underdogs, Mario Bautista, I'm not sure if he is an underdog right now. I really don't know where the line is, but I think he's probably the favorite in this fight. Probably deserves to be, in all honesty. But I'm not the type to bet against Jose Aldo. Well, let's take a quick glance at the rest of UFC 307. Roman Dolidze will take on Kevin Holland. Fun fight. That's going to be a really exciting and interesting fight right there. Will it mean a lot for the future of the middleweight division? No. Stephen Thompson taking on Joaquin Buckley. Stephen Thompson been in the top 10 for his entire life. Incredible karate stylist. He fought in Chuck Norris's kickboxing league, which used American kickboxing rules. So American kickboxing rules is not quite the correct term, but he used PKA, full contact style, which means it's a kickboxing organization which does not allow kicks to the legs. While he was a champion in Chuck Norris's kickboxing league, it was not recognized as normal kickboxing. It was kind of a secondary sport style kickboxing, kind of a mix, closer mix between, that full contact style of kickboxing was ultimately phased out. But like Uriah Hall and others like Stephen Thompson competed under those rules in the WCL under Chuck Norris. And of course, the most interesting thing about that was that Chuck Norris ran it. Anyway, let's get back to it. Joaquin Buckley is a really exciting fighter with absolutely no system to him at all. Unlike a lot of Stephen Thompson's last opponents, he's not really facing an up-and-comer who's probably going to fight for a title in the next few years here. This is a very winnable fight for Stephen Thompson against a fighter who is young and hungry, but maybe not so much an up-and-comer. I think we've seen the ceiling that Joaquin Buckley has. However, Stephen Thompson has not looked good in a long, long time. What is the last time you remember a really impressive Stephen Thompson performance? Look, for Joaquin Buckley's career, he has to beat him. He has to get a win here against an aged Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson is what, one fight away from retirement? I don't know. But he's not fighting for a title anytime soon. Cesar Almeida against Ihor Potieria. So Cesar Almeida was one of Alex Pereira's former opponents in Glory Kickboxing, and he was recently a contender. I think 2 years ago he was a contender in Glory Kickboxing, and I interviewed him, and he's a super nice guy and all that stuff. Let me make sure I'm thinking of the right guy here. Yeah. Loss against Donovan Vise, win against Serkan Özkaklian. Yeah, no, he's a great fighter, of course. And of course, I'm going to support Cesar Almeida all day long. But yeah, Ryan Spann against Oven St. Preux. Fucking God, cut the division. Jesus. Carla Esparza taking on Tisha Pennington. Cool. I believe Carla Esparza will be retiring after this fight. Court McGee, former heroin addict, will fight Tim Means. Both guys. How the heck are both of these guys in the UFC still? Court McGee versus Tim Means would have made a great Spike TV main event. But here we are. Both guys hopefully in their retirement fight. But yeah. So look, UFC 307, the main card is absolutely awesome. I love that Mario Bautista versus Josie Aldo fight. I love my girl, Kayla Harrison, of course. Cesar Almeida is going to get a major knockout here. My guy's coming back. And of course, Alex Pereira getting a nice victory here and there. Really, really good card. And now let's take a look at the last few weeks because I've been away doing stuff, doing things, if you will. And let's take a look back at some of the stuff that was going on. UFC 306, Merab Dvalishvili outpoints and outgrapples and outstrikes Sugar Sean O'Malley. And while this fight went exactly as we all expected, I think we all thought that Sean O'Malley would maybe have a little bit more of the ability to get up, the ability to wall walk, the ability to counter the takedowns with something. But he is a long striker who's a sniper who couldn't find his mark and looked like he couldn't even get motivated throughout the fight. Merab Dvalishvili outgrappled him to the point that he made him look entirely flat. And good for Merab Dvalishvili. He won a very dominant fight here. Really massive feather in the cap of Merab Dvalishvili. This smothering, relentless grappler who just takedown after takedown after takedown. He is non-stop. You can get up, but he's got a takedown ready for you. You can defend a takedown, and he's got a modification takedown ready to go for you. In this fight, this was a pretty big fight for the UFC. They're pushing Sean O'Malley as the next star. They did the Sphere, which I'll talk about in a minute here, but this was meant to be a very big moment for the UFC, right? A very UFC 100, UFC 129, UFC 200, UFC 189. These kind of like marquee events, UFC 205, of course, marquee events that are very big for the UFC, and the Sphere is one of those moments. And Herb Dean kept telling Merab Dvalishvili to work. So a lot of people were controversial on that, and a lot of fighters were making statements on this as well, that Dana White or someone, Hunter Campbell or someone like that in the back, whispered into Herb Dean's ear of like, you got to tell these guys, it's been a little bit of a boring card so far. You got to make sure that this fight's exciting. So I worked with an athletic commission, and I was trained by Big John McCarthy. This was maybe 12 years ago or something like that. I wasn't a judge. I wasn't a referee. I was an inspector, but I still worked under Big John McCarthy. And I think people get the wrong impression about athletic commissions in that they are impartial observers of a sport. But that's not the case. They are a stakeholder in the sport being successful. They do want this sport to be exciting. Some of the very exact instructions I was given working for the Athletic Commission is that remember that this is a spectator sport. Without the spectators, this is nothing. This is not an important thing. We could be doing this in front of 15 people and just trying to find out who the strongest fighter is with no limits. But we don't want that. We want an exciting fight. We want exciting fights so that people buy tickets, so that people tune into the pay-per-view. This is not only the philosophy of the UFC and its fans and its fighters, but also the Athletic Commission. The Athletic Commission wants to make exciting fights. The Athletic Commission has a vested stake in lots of tourists coming to Las Vegas, among many other places around the world. The better the UFC does, the better Anthony Joshua does, the better Tyson Fury does, the better the Athletic Commissions do. The more they're able to argue that their job is extremely needed, that we really do need this job here. But again, MMA is amongst the very important things that people like Big John McCarthy and Herb Dean teach, and that is that this is a spectator sport, and you need the spectators there. So him telling Merab Dvalishvili is well within his rights as a stakeholder, as a referee. Those are all normal things. The problem was that it was out of character from what we've seen in the UFC as far as referees goes. Usually referees are quite hands-off until it's really quite too late, right? Keep cheating until the referee says something and you're not really going to be punished for it. But 99% of the time, you can do very dirty things in the UFC and referees aren't going to be doing anything. But Herb Dean, right out of the gate, flexed his overcoaching rule, which I've never seen come about before, but it is a very real rule that you can overcoach, and especially if you're trying to trick the other fighter into doing things, that is overcoaching, that is against the rules there. And the rule was put into place likely for that exact reason that we saw Sugar Sean O'Malley's coach trying to fake coach Merab Dvalishvili. Here's the other side of that is Merab Dvalishvili's coaches are Matt Serra and Ray Longo. I don't think he's getting their voices mixed up in any way, but he was at least distracting Merab Dvalishvili. So I honestly think Herb Dean did the right thing. In one championship, people were saying that Herb Dean's very active. He's telling fighters to work. And well, one of the rules in one championship is that you have to engage every 3 seconds, at least every 3 seconds. After 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, fight. Let's go. That is just one of the rules in one championship. The UFC could implement those rules if they wanted to. They don't, because that's way too, it's trying to control the fight way too much, I think. And they don't want it to look that way. But keep in mind that the Athletic Commission, referees, judges, whoever it might be, have a very vested interest in the sport being successful. They could have looked at a fight like Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor and said, no, that is a guy with 0 wins and 0 losses in boxing against an all-time great who has multiple championships and fought in the Olympics. That is, we are here to protect fighters, and that's a ridiculous thing to do. Instead, they looked at Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather and said, hell yeah, unanimously, let's get that shit done. They are not here really to protect fighters. They are here to protect the sport, make sure it's a clean sport, but they do have a vested interest in this being entertaining. Anyway, what's next for Merab Dvalishvili? This is the best division in the UFC at 135 pounds. I absolutely love it. Your Corey Sandhagens, your Song Yadongs, it is just the best division. Put all these guys' names in a hat and see who comes out on top. We got Petr Yan fighting against the God of War in just a few weeks here. Come on. So yummy, so tasty. Give me that stuff. At the top of 135 pounds, you have Umar Nurmagomedov. But Merab Dvalishvili sounds like he doesn't really want to fight him. I mean, Umar Nurmagomedov has been very impressive, very highly skilled, very drowning. And he's been saying, I think he needs one more win, even though that's maybe the top contender. I ultimately think that fight does get booked. Merab seems a little bit hesitant. I think they're vaguely friends or vaguely trained together before or whatever it might be. But I do think Umar Nurmagomedov against Merab Dvalishvili is the fight to make. And I think that fight, if the UFC really does try its best to promote it, that's an amazing, easy fight to book. Look, you got a relentless, dominant wrestling machine over here that nobody can stop. He's out here out wrestling Olympic wrestlers. This man is relentless. He's unstoppable against the protege of Khabib Nurmagomedov, a cousin of Nurmagomedov. Incredible. That story writes itself here. And these two guys once liked each other, once trained together, but now they've got bad blood. It's an awesome fight. 135 pounds. Sign me up. I don't care who fights who. It's really good. But yeah, Umar Nurmagomedov against Merab Dvalishvili is likely the next fight. And this is a roundabout way. We were talking about Magomed Ankalaev. We were talking about Umar Nurmagomedov and Merab Dvalishvili, in that a lot of these fighters are not super sellable to American audiences. I mean, Alexander Pantoja is an incredibly exciting fighter who doesn't really speak English. Islam Makhachev is just an amazing fighter who doesn't really speak English. Ilya Topuria is just amazing. You want to see that guy's highlight reel. Bilal Muhammad is not super marketable. And I like Bilal Muhammad more than most people do. I like Bilal Muhammad. Dricus du Plessis, you just wouldn't show his highlights on SportsCenter. Alex Pereira, amazing. Love him. John Jones and Tom Aspinall, both just incredible. Valentina Shevchenko is actually quite boring. So those are the champions of the UFC, and we're starting to see what it looks like when you're not able to pay competitive wages over the long term for top athletes. So, for example, if you are a guy who's going into professional hockey and you do hockey at the KIJHL level and then move up into the CHL level, and you're looking at the NHL, but you're not quite good enough to make the NHL, but you're very athletic. Let's say you're a pretty good brawler on the skates as well. You're an enforcer, if you will, but you're not quite good enough to make the NHL. Are you going to look at the UFC as a viable option? You might, but maybe you just become, a physiotherapist or something like that and continue working with the NHL some way that way. Same with a baseball player who's maybe quite street tough and likes fighting in some way, but can't quite make the MLB after going through collegiate, something like that. The UFC is not really a viable option as a secondary for professional athletes, even athletes who would quite naturally make their way to the UFC, such as wrestlers in the Olympics. They can make more money from coaching or nutrition or whatever it might be. The UFC right now doesn't have an incredible stable of marketable stars compared to Ronda Rousey, Brock Lesnar, Conor McGregor, Anderson Silva, who's just like high-flying highlight reels, and George St. Pierre, this dominant machine. Lyoto Machida, your Shogun Huas, your Rampage Jacksons, even a young John Jones. This stable of incredible fighters who show their highlight reel on SportsCenter to get new fans looking at the sport. Right now, you're seeing the consequences of not paying competitively as one of the biggest sports leagues in the world. Because people who are extremely talented athletes with incredible potential are always going to look at the big four US sports first. And after that, that's about it. You do see it a lot in kickboxers move to the UFC because it does pay better. That's fair. But you don't see a lot of former soccer stars trying to take up kickboxing and then get into MMA that way. I mean, if you're a former soccer guy, you should probably just work wherever. But it's just not a competitive thing. If you're a young guy growing up in Spain and you took karate your entire life, the UFC is not coming for you. The UFC will not do a show in your country. If you're a young guy growing up in France, yes, the UFC will will come to your country, but not in your time zone. If you're a young guy growing up in the UK and maybe you're okay at soccer, but you're very good at fighting, well, you're not going to make much money on your home turf. You might as well just switch to something else. You need to be competitive enough that people who are naturally gifted and athletic want to go in your sport. Look, it's the UFC is a capitalistic place, they always say. We pay what people are worth. Well, you're not. You collectively, you are not paying these people enough. And because of it, they are looking at other sports before they're looking at the UFC. And it's embarrassing that a lot of these guys go to KSW and get paid more, or, stick around in Cage Warriors because they get paid more. Paddy Pimblett said he took a pay cut from Cage Warriors to the UFC just to compete in the UFC. A lot of these guys just take the risk. I mean, Artem Vakatov probably was making more in kickboxing than he is on the Dana White Contenders Series contract, but he has potential to make more. But you're seeing the object, the end point of not paying competitively in a capitalistic structure, and that talented, smart, skillful people are going to go where the money is best, and that is not in the UFC. So that's why your cast of champions are a series of people from Central Asia. One of the cast outs of the UFC, my good friend Impa Kasanganay, makes more money in the PFL. You're not paying competitive wages. You're going to see more and more people walking away from the UFC just because it's not paying people. Conor McGregor wasted his best years not because of injuries, not because of partying. Those were factors, but mainly Conor McGregor threw away his best years at the negotiating table. If the UFC paid what he was worth and gave him a fair deal, he would have fought 10 more times. And the UFC would have made 10 times more money off of Conor McGregor. But instead, they have a 2-fight contract with him left, and he wants to fight him and get out of the organization. He would make more money fighting Jake Paul. Probably losing to Jake Paul because of size disadvantage. He would make more money in BKFC or Dirty Boxing, fighting some Platinum Mike Perry or whatever. That's embarrassing. The UFC is one of the biggest sports organizations on earth, and it should pay like it. But let's talk about how great the UFC sphere, UFC Noche, was. I love when the UFC does something a little bit creative after years stuck in the apex, stuck in arenas, not even looking at stadiums. They finally do something a little bit creative. By the way, the UFC has done tons of stadiums in the past. They just don't want to because they're more expensive. They finally do something a little bit interesting, which was at the Sphere in Las Vegas. And it was awesome. It was great. I'm so happy to see them do stuff. Write a love letter to Mexico. 6 short films animated just as a love letter to Mexico. Very cool thing to do. I love that quite a bit. Very cool thing that you can put on these highlights on sports centers or your ESPNs or whatever it might be, and people get what's going on here. And that is a very special event. It's very cool. I think the UFC should do something annually like this. If you really wanted to make it fair for MMA, Brazil, Japan, something like that would be really cool. But in terms of middle-class income earners in the US, Brazil and Japan are not really those people. Of course, that's why Mexico makes a lot of sense. In terms of MMA fans, of course, Brazil and Japan make sense, but we're looking to make money here. At the end of the day, this isn't a sport that we are making out of the goodness of our heart. We're looking to make money. But it was a cool thing. I'm really happy to see it. Like in a world where we have like Toy Story 9 and Star Wars, whatever, and another Star Wars show and another Star Wars animated show. And we got another Marvel movie in phase 19. Some people you've never heard of. And you got some other Marvel TV show. You got Moana 2. You got another Fast and Furious movie. Things stagnate. Creativity stagnates in place of content. They look to make content before they look to make new stories. And that's why the UFC had stagnated for a long, long time, since COVID, really. And it's great to see them come back and do something creative. Put on their thinking caps and really do something that you'll remember forever. Whether you loved it or hated it, you will remember UFC Noche at the Sphere forever. You're going to be an old person in the old folks' home, in your wheelchair, barely able to talk, barely able to hold your food down, but you will sit there and go, yes. I watched Valentina Shevchenko take down Alexa Grasso a bunch of times, and it wasn't particularly exciting, was it? Any other notes on this one? Yeah, Diego Lopez defeated Brian Ortega. I know, we know. Look, I said that ahead of time. Diego Lopez now enters the top 3 in the very competitive featherweight weight class. He's a really aggressive, exciting fighter. Not much of a system fighter. I mean, Alexander Volkanovski, if Volkanovski is still healthy and not too past his prime and mentally still there, he should beat Diego Lopez quite well. But Diego Lopez is a fun, exciting fighter for anyone in that division. I'm not completely sold on him. You know, I like a little bit more technical fighters, but love the attitude and style of Diego Lopez. Oh, and another thing I was going to talk about, the UFC, of course, with their stable of fighters who just look like you can't promote any of these people in the US. They know. You're not competing competitively so that fighters want to go into your sport, but you're also not giving them the opportunities to really make money. So let's say an NBA player can get sponsorships and wear his own sneakers on the court. A WNBA player, same thing. They can have massive sponsorship deals. But someone like Francis Ngannou talked about with the Crypto.com deal versus one of his sponsors, he lost $20 million. So the UFC directly took $20 million away from Francis Ngannou. You can be buds? Like, you can be buds with someone who took $20 million away from you? No, of course not. But if you are a high-flying, a talented athlete, you would probably make more money in the PFL and have better opportunities for sponsorships in the PFL. The UFC is just not remaining competitive. If you are a second-rate athlete who's a bench warmer in hockey or a bench warmer in MLB or whatever, you'd make more money just from sitting there, and you can seek sponsorships on your own time and stuff like that. Just the UFC just made such a funny call of like, we're not doing NASCAR. We're not going to do the NASCAR thing. What's wrong with NASCAR? Wait, it's one of the biggest it's one of the biggest viewership sports in the United States, and its fans spend tons of money on NASCAR every year. When I was in business school, they talked about NASCAR as one of the highest has the highest fans to money spent ratio of any of the big sports. So those cars, those sponsorships on people's cars where they spam sponsors on it is worth a lot of money to the driver, to the sponsors involved. And it's nice to be I've sponsored a few fighters before. I know the ROI is zero on it, but I am proud that I get to support some of these people. So on Instagram, I lead off with that. On my podcast, I lead off that I sponsored this fighter. I'm not making any money back from it, but I'm very proud that I did that. And you see that in the UFC as well. A lot of guys would just have their local tire shop or their local pizza place sponsored on their shorts. Their pizza place isn't making money back on that, but they hang a picture of that person in their lobby forever because they're proud that they were able to sponsor a UFC athlete. It takes the micro to the macro. You're a small business owner on the streets and you have a UFC fighter that you sponsor. That's super cool. And look, at one point, sponsors in the UFC were getting very serious. We're talking about Gatorade, Nike, Burger King, McDonald's, Xbox. Does it get bigger than that? It does not get bigger than those organizations. Of course, people getting sponsored by beer companies or energy drinks are all par for the course. But then the UFC took it all away. And that's why someone like Ronda Rousey, why would she stay in the UFC? They took away her sponsorship abilities. Brock Lesnar isn't, a Brock Lesnar type, let's say. He's not coming to the UFC. You can't put Jack Link's beef jerky on a shirt anymore. Affliction was paying Georges St. Pierre millions of dollars. EA UFC was paying Georges St. Pierre millions. Gatorade, Nike, all these people paying Georges St. Pierre and John Jones. And the UFC said, no, thanks. You need to pay competitively. And that's what the UFC has not done. Let's take a look at Renato Moicano taking out Benoit Saint Denis live from Paris at some, desert time zone in the United States. But still, it was in Paris and the crowd was so involved. I like Renato Moicano so much because he does recognize the game that we're playing with fame here and that he has been in the UFC for 10 years and was just a middling fighter at 145 pounds. It wasn't until that he really started running his mouth that people took notice of him. And now he's getting main event spots and he's Money Moicano, the motor-mouthed man from Brazil. He is a very exciting, aggressive fighter who really takes opportunities. He catches kicks into takedowns on the feet. He's jabbing people up. He has really impressive ground and pound. I was really impressed with this fight with Renato Moicano. But Benoit Saint Denis wasn't doing as bad in the second round as people were making it out to be. Like, this guy had one eye and was still outstriking Renato Moicano at points. It was not safe for him to continue as he had one eye and a massive cut going on. So that was a good stoppage by the doctor there. Renato Moicano very much wants to move up in the UFC rankings, but people have pinned him against Paddy Pimblett. And it's because Paddy Pimblett said, I accept on Instagram. I will fight Renato Moicano. And Renato Moicano responded and said, you don't want this. I'm going to hurt you if we fight. And Paddy Pimblett is one of the interesting ones because I think he spent some time striking on the feet to really carve out his skills. Now he's an exciting fighter with a major following, and he's one of the bigger names in the UFC, but he is primarily a grappler. And he always has been a grappler. So it's a matter of on the feet, I think we've seen his ceiling, but he was able to get it to the ground. He's a very good fighter, but it's just a matter of where you think that ceiling is. On the feet, he's not getting any better. If you add in his grappling, as we just saw against Bobby Green, he's really good. But is he a top 5 fighter? Is he championship quality? I don't know. But I actually think the Renato Moicano fight is a pretty fun one. I think Moicano wins that one, so maybe the UFC wouldn't do it. But who else do you put Paddy Pimblett against for, you want to use your stars effectively. Like he beats a Jalen Turner, maybe he beats a very old. Doesn't he? I don't think he beats a very old Rafael dos Anjos. He's not going to beat Max Holloway, Mateusz Gamrot, I don't know, Beneil Dariush. I really don't know what's next for Paddy Pimblett, but Renato Moicano does move up into that Rafael Fiziev, Mateusz Gamrot, Beneil Dariush range. Your Dan Hooker, of course, very exciting one there. I'm just looking forward to more from it. I'm really excited for the future of Renato Moicano. Whatever he does next, I am excited for that. Let's take a look at some of the other headlines going on. We're just going to go off the cuff here. UFC legend slams Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Yeah, Frank Shamrock, says what he thinks. Frank Shamrock's a really good story, really interesting guy. Jorge Masvidal teases major fight announcement. God, who cares? Who cares, man? Who cares about Gamebred? No offense, but holy crap. He was a journeyman in Strikeforce who wasn't even good enough to fight for the Strikeforce title and came into the UFC and was again a middle-of-the-road fighter who had 3 incredible knockouts against Ben Askren and Donald Cerrone and Darren Till, and that changed the trajectory of this man's career. But look, he got outboxed by Nate Diaz. Don't spend your money on a Jorge Masvidal fight. Oh, Alex Pereira gives back to the needy. This was really nice. He gave thousands of food boxes away, and he did it on camera, and he said, I want to inspire other people. So thousands of food boxes goes to thousands of family in the favela in Brazil. That is a great move. I love that. Dan Hardy advocates for the end of the elbow ban in the PFL. So the PFL, in all their fights, they allow elbows except for in tournament fights, and they primarily do tournament fights. Of course, if you're fighting every 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be, the PFL doesn't want to have to worry about elbows causing cuts that won't heal in time. And I get the reason. I fully get the reason. But Dan Hardy says, no, that's no good. And, I was talking to the owner of the PFL a while ago, and he says, look, that's just the way it is. We're banning elbows in tournament fights. It would be great if they allowed elbows in the finals of the tournaments. Because there's no more fights after that. You're done. You're in the finals of the tournament. And I do like a ton of the things that the PFL is doing with regional tournaments that kind of lead to international tournaments. Like they have PFL Middle East and North Africa right now, 100,000 in the final there. PFL Europe, 100,000 in the final there. They will be expanding to UFC South America in the future. They are looking at PFL Asia in the next little while here. I have a good authority they're doing that. Those are very cool. $100,000. And then the major PFL tournament series, which $1 million in the end here. It's really cool. I like that structure a lot. It's very FIFA, and that's very cool. So if it all works out for the PFL, I think they have a great opportunity here. But they should allow elbows in the finals of the tournament. Absolutely. Conor McGregor predicts Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Man, Conor doesn't look good, does he? He is getting worse. I think that man is spiraling, and it's really too bad to see. I don't know if this was avoidable in terms of if he had more fights in the UFC and kept busier in the training room. Would this have been avoidable? I really don't know. But this man, you've seen him in live streams. You saw him at the boxing event with Anthony Joshua. He doesn't look good. He does not look well at all. This man is wrecked out of his. I mean, you saw him on the Roadhouse tour. I spoke to John Kavanagh a while back, and I was asking him about like this story, and you can see the interview. But I was asking about this story. And he said, "Look, you guys know as much as I do about Conor. I don't know what Conor's up to." He said, I haven't spoken to him for about a year, and I'll talk to him at the Roadhouse premiere. So if he hasn't talked to his main coach for a year, what is he doing? This guy is it's not going to be a good future for him. I don't love that. But we'll see what happens here. But yeah, he can make more money from dumb boxing fights. He can probably make more money fighting like Manny Pacquiao in Ryzen in Japan, to be honest with you. Or he fights some K1 champion or something like that. Things are getting heated between Alien Perez and Tracy Cortez. Fans. Look, I recognize there's a major horny factor to this, and I use it in my thumbnails to get lots of clicks. But y'all need to calm down. There is tons of nudity on the internet that you can find. You don't need it in MMA and the UFC. Nick Diaz shares a new training footage. Nick looks really bad. Nick looks just terrible. Nick is not in a good place mentally. Physically, he's not in a good place. There is no fights for him left. You think Tony Ferguson is washed? Nick Diaz is way more washed than that. Look, Nick Diaz's high point of his career was 2008 against Frank Shamrock, 2006 against Takanori Gomi. It's been 20 years since he was in his prime. He's not making a comeback now. It's not happening. He's not even going to win a fight now. The UFC is being cruel by doing this to Nick Diaz. All right, let's wrap it up. My name's Tim Wheaton with Fight Weekly here on LowKick MMA. We're going to be talking UFC and MMA next week, same time. If you want to talk some kickboxing and Muay Thai, there's been some major movements in the world of kickboxing and Muay Thai. I do a show on Wednesday, Kick Weekly on the Calf Kick Sports Network. Folks, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all your time, and I will talk to y'all soon. Thank you again.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.